This is a summary of our observations from 27 August 2020. This is Region 1, Area C, also called Charlie. It is a small spur off of a logging road. It actually branches out into two spurs. The end of one is generally used for camping. The end of the other is generally used for habituation experiments. We set out 3 recorders, one on a stump near the camp area, that's the blue S. I set out one at the foot of a trail that comes down off the hill in the habituation area, that's T. I put one at the end of the cul-de-sac in the habituation area, that's the C. And I noticed while I was planting the recorders that someone has a habituation experiment going where there is a bottle of honey that's hung in a tree at about human eye level. So that's the schematic. For the audio summary here, I'm leaving out pretty common things like tree frogs. It was kind of windy. I'm leaving out the creaky trees. There are a lot of sounds that are just hard to make out. By the way, there's a 4th recorder running. I record audio on my cell phone, and when I am reviewing all of the recordings from the other 3 recorders, if there are any sounds that I want to make sure didn't come from us, I use that 4th recording as a reference to debunk any other unidentified sounds. Just after planting the recorder, just before we did the stimulation call, we had a raven. The raven was perched immediately over the camp area. The first part of this recording is from the recorder on the stump, and after the first couple of calls, you hear the raven the first call, and then I call back to the raven. Then I actually switched to the cul-de-sac recorder. The raven flew off towards the habituation area. You can see in the sound signatures on the spectrograph that it gets louder than the original call when listened to from there, and the raven flies over and starts to fly into the distance. At 1943, I did the whoops. I'll call it the stimulus sound. Sometimes when we're up here, we don't make any sound other than what's incidental in getting in and out of the car. Now, car doors can be heard quite some distance away, I'd say a good half a mile. So anything that's paying attention to what's going on in the forest is going to know that we're there. It's just a matter of normally it's no big deal, and we get ignored. The one time I did get activity, the branch break and the sound associated with it, these were sounds from 2 different directions, and they were obviously coordinated, but I had, at the beginning of the evening, called out the monotone whoop, which is kind of what we heard in our first orientation of the area when we were with the fellow who's sharing this research area with us. This time I used something more like the rising whoops that you hear a lot on TV, and well, I'll let you decide if the results were a little more spectacular than usual. Here are the whoops. Whoop, whoop, whoop. And that'll be it. I don't see making a big deal about it. As you point out, any hunter-gatherer worth their salt knows we're here already. This next segment has a raven that was just making simple low-level calls, not an alarm call. In the middle of that, there's some motor noise, either from an aircraft or maybe from the freeway quite a ways away, but that's probably just a little sound from an aircraft in the middle there. This next segment is a sound that came just after a car door closed. When I confirmed this with my cell phone recording, I just got into the car and I was talking with my wife, and I did not hear this sound, and I did not make this sound. This sound did not come from inside the car. This next sound we're pretty sure is an owl, but it is odd in that it's just a single call. There are no repeated calls, and that's a little unusual for an owl. At 1958, just 15 minutes after the whoops, was the first tree break. Now, this first version of it is recorded from the stump near the camp area. It was actually a lot closer to the habituation area, and this is roughly the direction we perceived it coming from the car. The second recording of it is from the base of the trail. There is a sound following that I initially thought might be a vocalization, but that led me to go ahead and show the third recording from just 40 feet away from the cul-de-sac that doesn't have anything at all resembling that sound. So that tells me whatever that sound was, it wasn't a vocalization generally audible in the area. It was a sound that was very highly local to just the recorder at the trail. It was probably just a bug. About 15 minutes after the tree break, there was another jet flying over. They're pretty frequent. But during this, we started to hear the call of an owl in the distance. In this case, it was off in the distance, a little bit north probably, and maybe a little bit towards us from the area called Delta. The owl is kind of hard to pick up over the plane, but you can see the signature in the audio in the spectrograph. Only a few minutes after that, I had heard something that I thought might have been some sort of a tap. I wouldn't really call it a wood knock. Well, I apparently have not heard what they would call wood knocks here, because I am told they're pretty spectacular in and of themselves. But I've heard tapping from time to time, and I wasn't sure if I had heard a tap or something like that. But I decided to find a couple of rocks in the camp area and do a double rock clack back. At 2035, there was this sound in the habituation area. We did not hear this in the camp, and it was not picked up by the recorder at the camp. This sounds really very mechanical. It was definitely on both recorders, so it was audible in the general area of the habituation area, but again, we couldn't hear it from the camp. I included this next bit basically just to have some of the thermal footage. Despite the activity around us this night, nothing showed up in my periodic thermal scans of the area, at least nothing nearly as interesting as this little rodent in the bush right next to the car. Well, I can't figure out what it is, but there is something in the tree right across from me here. See the little white spot?
I think so.
On the screen.
Yeah.
Middle of the screen. Right there.
Yep.
The owl was definitely on patrol and moving a little bit closer. It was more clearly audible than it was before, not just because we didn't have a jet flying over it this time. I left this whole sequence in because, as recorded from the stump right next to the camp, there was obviously a critter climbing around on the stump and checking out on a recorder. I thought it was at least mildly amusing. "2 hours and 17 minutes after the first tree break came the second tree break, and somewhat alarmingly it was in exactly the opposite direction. So the first tree break came from the south-southwest in the general direction up the hill. The second one, kind of alarmingly, came from north-northeast and the exact opposite direction. It was also quite a bit closer. The first recording I play is from the habituation area. You can tell from there it was a lot quieter, just as the first tree break was a lot quieter from the camp area. When I play the recorder from the camp, it was a lot more spectacular. It still doesn't really convey the impact that you feel when you're there listening to it live. I'm first playing the audio from the base of the trail in the habituation area to show how it was so much quieter and more subdued over there. Then I play the recording from the stump next to the camp. So of course we talked about the second tree break and discussed options, and were otherwise willing to stay. We decided to leave. It was about 15 minutes after the second tree break. I'm really glad that we weren't deciding to jump up and pack out immediately afterwards. I don't think I'd want to give them that impression. But there was still a plenty startling event as we went out to start to collect the recorders in the dark, and it's that spotted owl. Once again, I'm going to play the sound first as it was heard in the habituation area at the base of the trail. Then I'm going to play the sound from the stump recorder. We had just gotten out of the car and were heading to that recorder to collect it first when the owl gave us a bit of a surprise.
Hello. That was your great horned owl? Woo! Okay. All right. It's right up there. See it? Woo! On the stump.
Okay.
In the end, the subject left us with evidence of their presence, but not evidence of their identity, certainly not in terms of vocals. They could have chosen a variety of responses. The tree break is on the aggressive end of that spectrum. They could have done rock clacks or wood knocks or wood taps or a whoop or a howl or growl. There's a whole variety of things they could have done. Also, in the end, we should have expressed gratitude at their letting us know about their presence, and gratitude for their allowing us to share their space. Either way, it was a pretty eventful evening, and definitely worth taking the time to go out and visit this place.